Because if there's hydrogen and CO2, that checks this first box of, are there the chemicals you need to keep something alive?
Scientists describe Jacob's Well as dangerous not because it is mysterious, but because it is deceptively familiar.
Oxygen was being produced on this part of the seafloor, beyond the reach of the sun. There can't be photosynthetic oxygen production, but they're calling it dark oxygen production.
From the surface, it appears calm, almost inviting.
My job and the job of my colleagues who are thinking about this is to ask, is that enough to actually sustain a viable population?
But beneath that simplicity lies a complex underwater cave system shaped by geology, pressure, and time.
Jacob's Well is a freshwater spring that was first recorded around 1850. Measuring 12 foot in diameter at the surface of the well, it descends to 140 feet at its deepest recorded point and extends 4,300 feet to its furthest recorded point. The cool, clear water in Jacob's Well rises up from the Trinity Aquifer. The surface of the spring effectively sits below the surrounding groundwater level. That means water gets pushed up out of the spring by the weight of the surrounding water table. In 1924, the flow rate up into the spring was measured at 22 cubic feet per second. For the first time in the year 2000, the well stopped flowing. Since then, it's stopped flowing 4 times, with the most recent time in July 2022. This happens as groundwater levels drop, and so there's no water pressure to create the rising flow into the spring. The lower flow rate makes it easier for divers to enter the cave system because they don't have to fight their way against a current. It's not a safe cave system to enter.
Researchers note that its narrow passages, sudden drops, and silty floors create conditions where even experienced divers can become disoriented within seconds.
While cave diving has its inherent dangers, the 3 things that make Jacob's Well more dangerous are the flow of water that a diver has to work against on their way in, the narrow openings between chambers which are often sloping downwards, and unstable gravel that can fill those already narrow passageways. One of these restrictions is called the birth canal at around 70 feet deep. After divers descend a gravel slope, they have to push their way through an opening that can be as narrow as 15 inches depending on how much gravel has made its way down the slope. The slope opens into a wider chamber. Often divers have to dig their way through the gravel, then push their equipment through the channel ahead of them and into the chamber. Once through this narrow channel, divers are birthed into the next chamber. Over the years, as many as 9 diving fatalities have been recorded in Jacob's Well. There are possibly more unrecorded deaths. Today, you need a permit to dive the cave system.
One wrong movement can cloud visibility completely. One misjudged turn can trap a diver in a space too tight to escape.
On the 9th of September 1979, 2 divers arrive at Jacob's Well intent on diving the cave system. They're in a group of around 20 people, but these 2 want to go into the cave before the larger group can disturb the sediment in the cave. At 23:30 on the evening they arrive, they enter the water while most others are setting up camp. Kent Morpin and Mark Brashear are experienced divers in their early 20s. Kent is an assistant instructor. He's been diving since he was 12. They don't just want to dive the cave first, they want to go all the way to the last recorded chamber, which has a deadly history. Mark and Kent descend down the first chamber where the spring opens to the surface. It's a 30-foot drop to a bedrock platform where they then turn to move sideways into the next chamber. Chamber 2 is a long sloping chamber. Towards the bottom of chamber 2 is a narrowing passage into chamber 3 called the birth canal at around 75 feet deep.
Jacob's Well, scientists say, is a reminder that nature does not need malice to be lethal, only indifference.
After traversing the birth canal into chamber 3, Kent and Mark find a few other divers exploring what everyone considers the last safe chamber in the cave system. Mark and Kent have their sights set on a prize they know has already claimed the lives of 4 other divers, chamber 4. They descend the sloping gravel floor to the entrance of Chamber 4 at around 90 feet deep. This is bordering on the depth that divers will start to experience nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen narcosis is the neurological effect from breathing nitrogen under pressure. It's caused by nitrogen molecules in your breathing gas that are compressed together under pressure that then restrict the flow of neurons in the synapses of the brain. Divers experience this like drinking martinis. The deeper you go, the more martinis. Kent takes off his scuba gear, turns around and backs himself into the tunnel that leads into Chamber 4. Mark copies and follows. Joe Moy is in Chamber 3 and sees Mark back his way into the tunnel with only one light and no cave reel.
Scientists point out that depth, nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, and panic all interact in confined spaces like Jacob's Well.
What I think is also cool, and what fascinates me about the deep sea, is that there are microbes that live at underwater volcanoes, and they harness their energy from volcanic gases and chemicals. So they're actually fueled by the planet's core,
Wow.
which
I love
is
that.
cool,
Yeah.
because it's different.
Yeah.
And that is why myself and others, many of my colleagues who study these ecosystems, why NASA turned to us and they're like, hey, y'all think about these microbes that live off of planetary chemicals, right?
Yeah.
Can you help us think about what life might look like? What would it take to keep
Underneath
things alive?
the ice of Enceladus or Europa
That's it.
or the
That's it.
thick
That's it.
atmosphere of Titan,
Yeah,
perhaps.
right.
Yeah,
I'm not Hakim. I'm not an astrophysicist.
Yeah,
I have nothing to contribute there in any deep, meaningful way. But when we understand how these organisms on Earth can make a living off volcanic gases, let me give you an example of an interesting organism. These microbes called methanogens. They make methane.
In such environments, the margin for error collapses. Equipment failures become catastrophic.
Wait a minute. Aren't those the same ones? I hate to go back to this topic again, but aren't those the same ones that make farts in our gut?
Yeah, you carry around your own little methanogen colony, right? And those microbes, a lot of them make a living by taking hydrogen gas and carbon dioxide, and they react them, and they poop methane. That's what they do,
Interesting.
right? And when we go to places like Enceladus, and you got things like Cassini catching little whiffs of water
from the
vapor or
plumes.
CO2 and hydrogen because there's a little plume. First off, the plumes are like, well, how'd that happen? Where's that coming from? That's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But my astrophysics colleagues and geophysics colleagues are like, yeah, that suggests there's some kind of hydrothermal activity maybe. But it's the chemicals in there that catch my attention. Because if there's hydrogen and CO2, that checks this first box of, are there the chemicals you need to keep something alive? That's just the first box, though.
Right.
Air consumption spikes. Decision-making slows. The cave does not forgive hesitation or overconfidence.
Yeah.
And so, it's looking pretty promising in that regard. And now we have the hard work of saying, okay, what else might be needed to actually sustain a microbial community, to have them live and evolve, right? And that's a tougher question.
So is this, surface life photosynthesis
Yep,
is what you're describing, what I've heard the phrase chemosynthesis?
that's it. Yeah.
Are there chemosynthesis processes that result in the production of oxygen, just like with photosynthesis? Since photosynthesis comes in two types, does chemosynthesis also come in two types?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think that there's been a bit of work in thinking about can you have chemosynthetic oxygen production. Let me actually tell you, this brings up a little sidebar comment I want to make. Recently, there were scientists studying oxygen on the seafloor, and they were measuring oxygen in this area where industry wants to do deep sea mining. And it was just part of, let's figure out the microbes, the animals, and all that jazz.
From a scientific perspective, the well's threat is not dramatic or sudden. It is incremental.
And what they noticed is that oxygen was being produced on this part of the seafloor beyond the reach of the sun. There can't be photosynthetic oxygen production, but they're calling it dark oxygen production.
Interesting.
Right, super cool. And this has turned into a kind of a hot topic because people are like, wow, are microbes producing oxygen from chemosynthesis or some kind of chemical reaction? I think the answer is trying to be a good scientist. I'm like, sure, it's plausible. Let's talk about that. But I also think it's possible that these just abiotic, non-living chemical
Geological
reactions.
processes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we'll call them electrochemical reactions, where you have two different minerals.
Yes.
There might be oxygen production from that. So
yes.
let's give the authors the benefit of the doubt and assume that oxygen is being produced there. Fine. Let's also pretend that that could happen on something like Enceladus. That's fine. My job and the job of my colleagues who are thinking about this is to ask, is that enough to actually sustain a viable population?
Are there any animals, this is weird, that have both gills and lungs? I would love that, right? So I could dive into the ocean.
Yeah.
'Cause I just discovered that the southern elephant seal
Yeah.
can stay submerged for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's pretty badass.
Yeah, without gills. Yeah.
Right, it's pretty badass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there animals that have both? There are some definite funky animals out there, and this is one of the things I love about animal physiology and biochemistry, which I started off with in graduate school, is that animals have evolved all these cool tools to do different things. Like, let me give you an example. There are some frogs that have patches of their skin that's transparent, and they can suck up oxygen just through that little skin,
Through the water or the air?
through the water, right, or the air, actually.
Or the air.
The punchline with getting oxygen, right? For all animals need oxygen. The punchline is you need to be able to get as much oxygen as you need, but that surface also gives up water. So our evolutionary kind of compromise are lungs.
From methane-eating microbes to vast abyssal food webs, researchers see these hidden communities as essential partners in maintaining Earth's balance.
So we can breathe in oxygen and exhale it, but it really doesn't work as well as some other kinds of gas exchange things. So animals are cool because there's so many different designs to solve problems.
Yeah.
But like, none of them are perfect. They're all a compromise, right?
Yeah,
And that's okay. That's cool. It works.
Right.
But there are some creatures out there that have a little bit of both, and they live in crazy, weird places, like African lungfish, right? Which do really well. So, yeah.
When you talk about this being a microbial world, two things come to mind. One of them is mass extinctions.
Yeah.
And right now we're suffering this loss of biodiversity on Earth, right, due to people think human activity, but microbes aren't suffering that. And then there's the big extinction that occurred, and that was the only mass extinction allegedly that insects suffered. I've heard somewhere.
Right.
Is there a known record of microbial extinction events,
Ooh,
like
that is a
global
great
scale?
question. That is a great question.
What happens miles below the surface does not stay there. It ripples upward, influencing fisheries, atmospheric carbon levels, and the long-term health of the planet.
I don't know.
Yeah, I've never heard
I
that.
kind of doubt it.
Yeah.
But I want to remind, let's take a step back and say that mass extinctions have been a part of life on Earth since there's been life on Earth, and there's been many. And if you think about it, if we make an estimate, probably about 98 or 99% of all of the biodiversity that's ever existed on this planet is gone.
Oh, wow.
So the diversity we have today is precious and important.
Yeah.
But I do think we have to sometimes remind ourselves that things evolved and go extinct throughout Earth's past before humans ever tinkered with anything. Right? Now, microbes are wild because it's really hard to know what a microbial species is.
So when you see different bacteria, I mean, they're shaped differently.
They're shaped differently. So yeah, we got some different shapes. But let me put it this way. Despite your best efforts, if you fall in love with a cat, you're not going to have a cat-human baby.
At the same time, scientists are careful to stress a crucial paradox. Even life that thrives in total darkness ultimately depends on a sunlit world.
Right? That's like not going to happen. It's not in the cards. But microbes are kind of, how do I put this? They're sort of floozies with their genomes. What I mean is they can swap genes all the time.
With other
all the time.
species?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Yeah. So if we rely on a genome to say, okay, this is Hakeem and Hakeem's a human because this is what his genome is, we lose that in microbes. Like you can't do that very easily. So have microbes suffered mass extinctions? I'm willing to bet there are certain microbes that were alive on Earth in the past that aren't alive today.
Yeah.
Because the conditions on Earth don't favor them. But I don't know if I could call that a mass extinction in the way that, if we have a meteorite or an asteroid impacted and we have this die-off of animals. I don't know that they're the same.
Right.
It's a great question.
It's a different, that's a very different realm of existence.
Yeah,
the
it is.
microbial realm if you're doing that.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the ocean.
While hydrothermal vent organisms draw energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight, the broader ocean system they inhabit is shaped by solar energy.
Sure.
So
My favorite place.
I heard you said something about the ocean ecosystem and how it differs from our land ecosystems that we have contact with every day and think about. Go into that for me.
Yeah, sure. So so let me start with a bit about the ocean, right? It covers the majority of our planet's surface, and it is a huge part of what makes our planet habitable and comfortable for us. And I want to make it clear that you don't need an ocean for a planet to be habitable per se. You need water, but I want to make it clear that that the world as we know it today is really useful for us and for other animals, right? The ocean tempers heat, like it absorbs heat and releases heat. It keeps our planet from having the wild temperature swings that you know better than I do happen on on the moon or on Mars. There's like crazy temperature swings.
Surface photosynthesis drives oxygen production, fuels marine food chains, and sets the baseline conditions that make deep ocean life possible.
All right, but the other thing is the ocean is so foreign to us that sometimes it's easy to lose sight of just kind of how different a place it is. So check this out. So sunlight goes through the ocean, right? And it disappears at about 1,000 meters. Okay. And we call that upper 1,000 meters the epipelagic and mesopelagic. These are fancy names we come up with. But below that, we call that the deep sea proper, or bathypelagic.
Okay.
Now, the deep sea proper is the ocean beyond the reach of sunlight. And when you think about its size and its volume, you realize that 80% of our planet's living space is deep ocean.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Super cool,
Yeah,
right?
super cool. 80%.
So 80%. Now, so that means everything else that we think of off the top of our heads, the Serengeti, right? The Amazon rainforest, even the shallow water coral reefs, Washington, D.C., Boston, Paris, you name it, all that's in the other 20%.
Researchers describe the deep sea as a downstream beneficiary of the sun, sustained not by direct light, but by planetary processes that begin at the surface and cascade downward.
And I've said this little fact.
Because you have that top layer of the ocean. I would imagine that a big percentage of the 20% is that sunlit part of the ocean.
Yeah, that's
and,
right.
And the land,
That's right.
because the vertical extension of land is to the top of the tree canopy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
From the ground
that's
to
right.
the-
That's it. And so
And then
even that other
underground is
20%, a bunch
yeah.
of it is ocean, right?
Right.
So if you're talking about aliens, right? So I love saying that if aliens came to Earth and they had to go back and tell their leader what the typical condition on Earth was like, they would tell her it's cold, wet, dark, and salty.
Cold, wet, dark, and what else fits that description?
Yeah, right.
Cold, wet, dark.
I'll let you run with that one.
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything.
So because it's cold, ice cold seawater.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Now, that is really interesting, right? Because it means that this part of the ocean and we're just barely like getting eyes down there, right? Like we're just barely starting to study it and understand it.
For scientists, this interconnectedness reshapes how life on Earth is understood. The deep ocean demonstrates life's extraordinary adaptability.
So this seems logical. Self is commonly defined by that we can control. So I can move my fingers, but I can't wiggle your toes. The dichotomy then is based largely on control and manipulation. So the basic biology, however, tells us that we don't control most of the trillions of cells in the body any more than we do control a rock or a tree. So consider everything around you right now. Me up here at the podium, your hands, your body. Language and custom all say that that's outside us in the external world. But you can't see anything through the vault of bone surrounding your brain. Everything you see and experience right now, your body, the walls, the ceilings of this room, are an active process that's occurring in your mind. You are this process. You're not just the part that you control.
Yet what makes Lanza especially unique is his move from biology into cosmology and consciousness studies.
But this issue of is it really out there predates biocentrism. Again, once you fully understand that there's no independent external universe out there outside of biological existence, the rest more or less falls into place. So where exactly is your refrigerator? Where in the universe is it located? So start with everything that's currently being perceived. This room, for example, we all think it lies in the external world. But we've all already seen that nothing can be perceived that isn't already interacting with our consciousness. So since the images aren't imaginary, it must physically be happening somewhere. So the human physiology textbooks are very clear about this. They say, that the eye responds to particles that deliver little bits of energy that are, hit the retina or photoreceptors, and then they're channeled back through these heavy-duty cables to the back of the brain, where the perception of the images actually occurs physically.
In his 2007 book, Biocentrism, How Life and Consciousness Are the Keys to Understanding the True Nature of the Universe, co-written with astronomer Bob Berman, Lanza argues that space and time are constructs of the human mind.
So this process is augmented, of course, by other nearby parts of the brain that are as vast as the hallways of the Milky Way. Thus, according to human physiology textbooks, that is where actual colors, shapes, and movement happen. And that's where we perceive and cognize things. But can you actually access this visual part of your brain? It's easy. You're already doing it effortlessly right now with every glance. Custom says that what we see out there that's outside us. But such a viewpoint is necessary in terms of language and utility, such as please pass the butter that's over there. But make no mistake about it, the butter itself only exists in your mind. It's the only place where visual images are perceived and hence located. So explained in the language of biology, the brain turns impulses from our senses into an order and into a sequence. As the light bounces off the butter, various combinations of different wavelengths enter into our eye and then deliver the force to trillions of cells. And then in the brain, this information, which of course has no color in and of itself, appears as a yellow block of butter. Even the smell and texture of the butter is experienced in the mind alone.
Tools we use to structure the reality our consciousness perceives. According to biocentrism, the universe doesn't create consciousness. Consciousness creates the universe.
So your eyes just aren't portals to the world. You think you just see out there, but again, you can't see through the cranium. So what you're seeing, again, is everything that you think right there is out there is actually a construction happening moment to moment in your mind. So again, I want to emphasize that this is all happening in your head, and even the light from the bulbs in this room, they're moving through a space that's actually created in your mind. So consider everyday reality. So for instance, the weather outside. You see a blue sky out there, but the cells in your brain could be changed so that everything that's blue looks green or red. Could even do a little genetic engineering so that everything that's red makes a noise or vibrates or makes you want to have sex like some birds. Or, for instance, you think it's bright out, the circuits in your brain could be changed so that it's dark. You think it's hot and humid, but to a tropical frog it would look cold and dry. So this logic applies to virtually everything.
Lanza's ideas draw from quantum mechanics, particularly the observer effect, the phenomenon in which the act of observation appears to affect the outcome of a quantum event.
So bottom line is the butter isn't really out there, except by conventional language. The same is true for all perceived objects. Even the brain itself, the cells, electromagnetic events that we detect with our instruments, all of these are already been given a spatial temporal structure that the mind imposes. So we may imagine that there's two worlds out there, one out there and one inside our skull. But this two-world view is a myth. As we've seen, there's only one visual reality that exists, and that's the one that requires consciousness in order to manifest. Nobel physicist John Wheeler once said, "No phenomena is a real phenomenon until it's an observed phenomenon." The major handicap in adopting this new viewpoint is that language is created exclusively through symbolism to divide nature into parts and into actions. And even if you're well acquainted with the limitations of language, we always have to be on guard to dismissing things such as biocentrism too quickly because it doesn't at first glance seem to be compatible with the ordinary, customary construction of language.
He interprets this as evidence that consciousness plays a central role in shaping reality.
So the challenge, alas, is to peer beyond our habitual ways of thinking and to go beyond the tools of thinking, the thinking process itself. We need to grasp the universe in a way that is at the same time simpler and more demanding than we're accustomed to. So quantum mechanics describes the tiny world of the atom and its constituents with stunning accuracy, but in many ways it threatens the absolute notions of space and time. When studying subatomic particles, the observer appears to alter and determine what is perceived. The presence of the experimenter is hopelessly entangled with the attempt to what you're observing and the result that the scientist gets. In 1964, John Bell proposed an experiment that could determine if separate particles can influence each other instantaneously over great distances. First, it was necessary to create these bits of matter that shared the common wave function, using a special kind of crystal. And these particle pairs are called entangled particles.
In his view, without a conscious observer, the universe remains in a state of probability, rather than existing in any definite form.
We're not just a collection of cells and molecules that classical science describes. Hans Pagel, the esteemed theoretical physicist, once stated, "If you deny the objectivity of the world unless you observe it and are conscious of it, as many prominent physicists have, then you end up with solipsism, the belief that your consciousness is the only one." And that reminds me of, the first thing is I should say is that I think Pagels is right. The only thing here is, it is not just your consciousness that's the only one, it's our consciousness that's the only one. So the old Hindu poem says, know in thyself, in all one same self so, banished dream that sunders part from whole. The mind transcends space and time in that they're its tools, not the other way around. This concept of reality dissolves away human individuality. Sometimes, said Thoreau, as I drift idly on Walden Pond, I cease to live and begin to be. The walls of space and time are illusory. This is the prelude to immortality. We're forced to recall the words of the English poet John Doe. Never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, and to understand them in a more scientific way.